bit closer if you can't hear. Can you hear me back there? Ah, that's good. Look, my name is Pastor Ray Minicon. I'm from Sydney. I'm from the Cubby Cubby people on my father's side, Gurring Gurring on my mother's side. That's in southeast Queensland, Bundaberg area. I was born on my mother's country. And I do have a grandfather on my dad's side who was forcibly removed from Ambrym Island at the age of 12, along with about 60,000 other South Sea Islanders. So I have that heritage, very proud of both heritages. And we're here today to have this, I was going to call it a tonga, but it's a round table to look at some of the issues that we're facing as Indigenous peoples. We come from a very, very much of a brutal colonised history as Aboriginal people. We've only seen the light of days, in my experience anyway, since 1967. And I'm 76 years old, so I've experienced both sides of that first referendum on Aboriginal people and the removal of those very racist things within our constitution. And I have still, at this age, continue to experience the racism in our country and also the racism against our land. So we're here to talk about land rights. We're also here to talk about that the land does have rights. And we're here to talk about the ocean has rights, the forest, everything has, all of our living beings with us that has rights.
Muitas complicações neste momento, mas acho que pronto.
That's the reasons why I'm here. This here is my great-grandson, my first great-grandson. And when I was coming over here, I wrote him a letter. And I read the letter at ALSIP yesterday to say why I am here. He's the reason. And all the issues that we face, he faces. And so I wanted to make sure that he understood the challenges that we're going to be facing here. That's him sitting in his little pram, looking at our globe, but also... Oh. How do you do this forward again? How do you make this work? Anyways, I've got two photographs of him. This photograph here is him. He was taken by my son when he was sitting in Cairns there next to the Esplanade there, and I superimposed the earth on the photograph through both two AIs, artificial intelligence and Aboriginal intelligence. And there's this photograph here is very important also because, as you can see, in 1990, Carl Sagan asked NASA to turn Voyager to photograph Earth from 4 billion miles away. And this is that image, a tiny blue dot. That's Earth. That's where we live, in space. Just a tiny blue dot. And so I want my grandson to realize the scope as well as perspective, that this is where everything takes place, on that tiny blue dot. All of our wars, all of our climate crisis, everything takes place on that. So I wrote him a letter. I read the letter out at ALSIP yesterday so that people could understand my desire to make sure that my grandson gets the kinds of information from his ancestors as to who he is and what he is. And he's got 4 traditions in his lineage. He's from Aboriginal, Torres Strait, Borneo, and South Sea Island. So to kick things off, I just wanted to ground us as Indigenous people in these 4 declarations, and then I'm going to hand it over to our secretary here. First of all, I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples are entitled, as against the whole world, to possession, occupation, use, and enjoyment of the lands of their ancestors. Secondly, I want to declare that all Indigenous peoples are not outsiders or foreigners in their own lands. They are the descendants of the first peoples of their country, the original inhabitants, and they are to be recognised as such. Thirdly, I declare that none of the events of invasion, settlement, federation, or the advent of foreign citizenship laws have displaced the unique position of Indigenous peoples with their lands. And finally, I want to declare that Indigenous peoples have a unique connection to their country. It is not just ancestry or place of birth or even both. Indigenous peoples have a connection with the land, waters and skies under Indigenous laws and customs, and no imposed Citizenship Act remove or modify that connection, and no parliament or foreign government has removed or modified that connection by any other laws or legislation. So I just wanted to make sure that we declare who we are here, sitting around this circle. We know who we are. That's what we bring to this table here. We are the sovereign owners of our own country, and we know what our country offers. We looked after it for the last 60,000 years, so we are the custodians. We know what climate crisis is. We know how to fix it. It's not artificial intelligence, it's Aboriginal intelligence that will bring together the ways in which we fix this. Not just science, but Aboriginal intelligence. And we offer our services continuously throughout all of these negotiations. But the reason why I'm here is because of that little man there who's really filled me with a little bit more passion to get up and start speaking out again at 76 years old.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Uncle Ray, as part of everyone in the circle, as First Nations Mob of Australia. Elders got to set the path for us, and you always got to pay respect to elders. They lead us and show us the way. So it is important that Uncle Ray sets the scene for all of us as we have this yarning circle. And for those of us who are allies of Indigenous people, it's really important that, this circle is filled with Indigenous people, and that we have an elder, and Uncle Ray, who's a strong leader, been talking up for a long time, and he has an important role of laying the pathway for us. And now you're saying you got another young fella that livened him up a bit more. So you get another 20 years, Uncle, or what, to keep going? No. Can we do another round of applause for Uncle Ray, please? My name is Sam Murray. I'm a Yilka Wangatha Noongar woman. My country is Yilka country, Cosmo Newbury. It's in the middle of WA, in the bottom half. I come from Great Victorian Desert. It's Spinifex country. It's flat red sand. It's got mulga trees, gum trees and sandalwood trees. We've got special animals like the nyari, which is the thorny devil, the yilluba, which is the big goanna that we hunt, and obviously the big red kangaroo, marlu, which is very tasty to eat. I'm very honoured to be here, and as always, we want to pay respect to the traditional owners and custodians of the country that we own. As Aboriginal people, we always want to pay respect to the other people's country that we land. So for the mob here, I want to pay respect to say that we are honoured to be here and to talk and represent our mob back home from Australia. I've been asked to yarn up with 4 questions. I think they're hopefully up above if we can put them on the screen, Biren. And I'll just read them out first so you can have some time to think about it. Now, this is an opportunity for First Nations mob in this circle to contribute and have your opinion put out there. And it's really important to make sure, give each other space to yarn up. that we all have a space for each other. You know, some of us are big yarners and talkers, including myself. And then there's also people in the circle who might be a little bit more shy or younger that, you know, they want to say something, but they want to be respectful. So part of my role in the next little bit is to make sure that those young mob or mob who are a little bit more shame, that I get to call them out as well and give them a safe space to talk. So the 4 questions are, I'll just go through, is what existing structures within the UNFCCC best support First Nations and Indigenous participation? What has worked and what hasn't in amplifying Indigenous voices at COP30? Sorry. Thank you. What outcome should we seek leading into COP31? And I think this is where we can really make an impact. We only have 50 minutes here, but it'd be good that we end up with a couple of good, strong things, strong messages, and that my young sister here, Amber, will pull together at the end and make sure it's Balya, which means it's right desert way, before we put it forward, and it's really important. So we have 30 minutes on this before we have to wind up, which I know, as always, it's us mob don't get enough time to yarn up, but we've learned to adapt, as we all have as Indigenous people, and we will make the best of what we can do. So what outcome should we seek leading into COP31? And number 4, how can Indigenous knowledge systems shape the global clean energy transition and climate adaptation pathways? So we have 2 microphones that will pass, they're around there. And if we, as always, you know, pay respect to each other, let each other have a bit of a yarn. And if you feel comfortable to add to any of those 4 straight off the bat, you're like, you know, sis, I feel like I want to say something, you know, add to it. Please, you know, take the microphone, and then what we'll do is just share it around, and I'll pay respect. I won't ever try and jump across. But if someone's yarning up a bit too much, and we need a young fella that wants to jump on, or they're a bit shame and they don't want to be disrespectful, I'm the one that probably might have to say, lovely to hear that yarn. Can we also get this young person or this person to talk? So that's done with utmost respect to everyone here, because I'm a big believer that we all got to have a space to talk. So if you have anything to say or want to contribute straight off the bat, you're like, I'm ready to go, grab the microphone. There's 2 floating around, and I'll just open it up to the floor now. I'm looking at someone over here, he's looking over at me, he's ready to go. There's a couple of Yorta mob here that I know to talk. Lee's looking, yeah, I'm ready to go too. That's it, I'm going to start dobbing in people too when they don't talk, and I know most of you, so yeah.
Other questions? All right, well, I think, thank you very, very much this thing, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Hello. Whoa. Hey. Thank you very much, and thanks, Unc, for the beautiful words of wisdom and taking us right back to the larger picture through your grandson. And as I was looking at that image, actually, I was noticing that he's sort of looking down straight at the Amazon. So I don't know if you planned that, but that was pretty good. Yeah, I was just actually looking at yes, yeah. So, yeah, I'm Stevie Thorpe. I'm a Gunai, Gunditjmara, Yorta Yorta, Palawa, Muckjarrawin. The list goes on. As we find out our culture, you know, I come from the Victoria, you know, you know, my mobs were hit the hardest by colonisation. I come from the Gunditjmara people. They call that the convincing grounds, which is where, you know, they really felt the brunt of that colonisation. There was only a few of us mob left out of hundreds. You know, there was less than a handful. And, you know, the battle to revive our culture and to stay resilient and stay strong with that connection has obviously been difficult, but they're the fighting Gunditjmara, and they've stood up. And actually their World Heritage listed UNESCO place there is Budj Bim. So that's acknowledged as a World Heritage Site. Obviously, every part of country is a World Heritage Site, including here as well. Actually, yesterday I was walking down the street and was with another young person. I came with the Climate and Health Alliance, and we were walking on the road, and we were getting hit by all these fumes from the cars. And then as I said, let's cross the road there. I can see it must have been a Royal Botanical Gardens. You couldn't get in there, but there was a fence. And as we got closer to the fence, what we realised is our lungs just opened up. And that's what climate change is. You know, greening this planet. And, you know, those trees instantly supported our system and changed everything, changed the whole game for us. So that sort of really made me realise the power of this place, the Amazon, of course. So I think, you know, when we look at the outcomes that we should seek leading into the COP31, it's not only about what our systems and our sciences and our knowledge can do in terms of action, but it's about how we were able to generate health and well-being for ourselves by connecting spiritually and being connected to our, you know, that spirit, which our ancient practices always, you know, knew how to connect us to. And I think one of the big things that's missing here and at these events is ways for people to connect to that. Because I think if we're going to come up with solutions that are going to be about supporting the land and supporting well-being, we need to be connected to our being, you know, because we're human beings. So I think this has got to be led by the Indigenous peoples of the world, and because they're the ones that understand how to get us there. And our mob are no different than that. So I think this is slightly different than some of the questions that are shaped there, but it's not separate at all. Climate and health is not separate. So that's just a couple of two cents I wanted to add in there.
Yeah, no, these are just guides too, so if you want to feel like something you want to put out there, please do. They're just questions that can be guided in starting. Thank you, brother, for that.
I just want to acknowledge, obviously, all the elders here. And
I just wanted to say something to my brother here, because his auntie, Lydia, made a statement in our parliament in support of the West Papua people, which is very powerful. And, you know, in a sense, she's possibly the only voice in our country left standing, which is Lydia Thorpe.
This young lady here.
na mani nyanyari ti kirawara ngai tarkitana malawara miana ngai tarkitana nyaparlanya kita ngalio kokata. So my name is Jakira. I am Ghana from Adelaide, from Tandanyanga, but that name Ghana is like placed upon us by a white anthropologist, so the proper name for us is actually Miana, which translates to the people of the country. Yeah, so I think in terms of seeking an outcome, I think all of us should have a fair consultation process for all of our intergenerational voices to be heard. But I think the most important outcome and demand that I think First Nations fellows and our Pacifica brothers and sisters can benefit from is the legislation of the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. I think that is something that really needs to be legislated so we can hold our country accountable, but also to be strategic in what all of us want to achieve. Because as we know, the system is against us. So, you know, there was a big win in the Torres Strait, but there was also a big loss. So we have to be strategic about how we go about different people's countries and how we can, best support the sovereignty of our lands, waters and sky territories,
Just on that matter of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, I go back to Lydia again. Lydia called the leadership together in, was it last year, I think, and took the whole legislation, or a draft legislation, to the government to actually endorse the UN, what is it? Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. She did that in the morning. It was kicked out of the office.
Good morning.
Kicked out in the afternoon. So yes, she's tried. Listen to her voice, listen to what she's doing, give her the support that she needs to ensure that our voices are heard in Parliament, because she's the only one that's in there talking up for us. And there are other black fellows in there that, you know, need a bit of a kick up the muyu to get them working too.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to? Just one of you.
pleasure and
Thank you, thank you.
today. We're very
Yeah,
happy
so my
to
name's Charlene
present
Becky. I'm from
work
Canada.
from the
I
alliance
spent
called
about 7
Unidos
months in
por la Acción
Australia,
Climática.
living and
This
working and
alliance
traveling around the country. In Canada, I have a small company. We have one Indigenous employee. I've employed Indigenous people in the past. But that inclusivity is very big. Our former government did allow recognition of some of the First Nations in Canada. So some of the First Nations groups now have recognition. They've been granted their lands back. They've been paid for their more grant programs and university programs for education, but there's still many of the groups in Canada who are challenged with drugs and lack of employment. So it's still a very big problem in Canada. There's some talks going on in the Canadian Pavilion right now for the First Nations groups from one of our provinces. I think that having a voice is the most important thing, you know, and getting in front of the right people. As they mentioned, your Aunt Lydia is there in the front of the right people. But also getting enough people together, because it's a strength in numbers for getting your voice heard.
Yeah.
And understanding in Canada, in the 1960s, there were many treaties signed, but the people in charge of those treaties, the treaties weren't fair. And so they didn't include indexing of funds. They had a very low rate for the acreages that they said they were going to share with neighbors. In some areas, those are going back into the Indigenous groups, but not everywhere yet. So
Thank you. Yeah.
it's very good, yeah.
And also just to remind us that Canada is one of those countries that in their constitution they have an article for treaties. Yeah. So they're much more advanced than us. We've got sweet nothing out of our constitution, and out of the voice we've got sweet nothing.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah.
We do have to
Sure.
get some First Nation mob here to
Yeah.
have a conversation. So in terms, if I can move it towards, what do you as First Nations Australian people want for COP31? If it ends up coming to Adelaide, we only have a little bit of time left, so I'm really keen to hear what are some real strong practical things that, while we have this opportunity, they can go up to government to say, this is what we want when it comes to home, to us mob. Over to
I
Lee.
think the practical terms of what we want coming in the coming in the next COP is, how do we as Indigenous populations right across the world have our own pavilion in relation to that? How do we as Indigenous Australians, should it be there, how do we actually man that and control that? But how do we bring the populations of Indigenous peoples from across the world into that space to ensure that they are fairly treated and fairly share their concerns in relation to that? In relation to whether we or whoever gets it, if, you know, what we should be looking at in regards to who we are as Indigenous populations is really looking at linguistics and socio-linguistics. Many of the place names on our country at home belong to our language. So, you know, so that describes the environment, right, and in regards to that. And how do you look at your totemic situations of our families, our individuals, and the importance of environmental socialism in regards to the structure on how we survived for so many, for that long period that we have been here walking on this earth. So that should be a focus on, one, an individual space like this for Indigenous populations to come, manned by Australian and shared by all across the world.
Thanks, Rotherley. Would you like to say something?
Tingila, Elagain and Anali Bunjalung. My name is Ella. I'm from Bunjalung region, northern New South Wales. I think if we do get COP31, it's important to have Indigenous voices centred at the space of that. And, you know, that's what they said that was going to happen here, but yesterday we saw a big protest because it hasn't happened. And we, as, you know, the original Australians of that country, have to ensure that we not only have us here who are here now, but our grassroots voices on the ground speaking, with Indigenous villages set up for protection for our people, and ensuring more of us get into these spaces, because majority is what's going to allow us to actually help people understand what's happening. When we're in the minority and we're up against a government that creates policies for the majority, we are always going to be disenfranchised. And so therefore, I will say numbers, numbers, numbers.
Thank you, my sister. We've got Uncle Les over here.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Leslie Schultz. I'm from the goldfields of Western Australia. I got no gold, but my greatest thinking about what we're looking at up there in the guidelines is part of our Aboriginal makeup. We have language, as our brother just mentioned. We have land. It's in a big way. We have law, and we have ceremony. They're all the pillars of our Aboriginality. Language. There's only one state, New South Wales, that has language legislated in the current Australian government system. Every other state and territory has not got a language legislation. We need to have First Nations language legislation so that we can understand this climate change process under our intellectual understanding, not according to English, because where I come from, I have at least 5 to 6 groups where English is the fourth language. They've got Ngandara, Pitandara, they've got Murdu, and there's lots of other small languages. So we need to make sure this Australian government comes accountable to the Indigenous First Nations in building one of the pillars, which is language, in legislation.
Thank you, my uncle.
Nationally.
That's it. And for the mob that come now, what we're talking about is having a bit of a yarn. Bjorn, how are we going with time there, brother? Still good. About what we need to put forward up to government ready for climate COP31 if we end up with it. So we're just having a bit of a yarn. People have put some really great suggestions about how we can make sure that we're front and centre. So please feel free to jump in any time if you want to add to that yarn that's been going on, yeah. Is there anyone? Yes, sorry.
Kapa Bailood, Bomjia, everyone. My name is Tish. I'm a proud Kukulug woman from Kukugul Nation from the island of Musig and Zenith Kes in the Torres Strait Islands. I think, thank you everyone for sharing. Really echo and really agree and really back what you've all said. And just sort of hearing everyone, I think in terms of sort of outcome seeking leading into COP31, if we are successful with the bid, I'd love to sort of find ways how we could be more coordinated in learning more about each and every issue of everyone's country. Because I don't know, but want to continue to stand in solidarity, and as I continue to learn, to help support us together in a unified message and in strength, as we have such a rich history and have been defending and protecting for millennia. You know, we can set what's right and set the agenda for next year of Indigenous rights.
Great points, fantastic. Anyone, this young fella here, Brody, is it?
Yao Yumub, my name is Brody, proud Yorta Yorta, Jajarong man, raised down in Chuida with the Palawa community. And I'd like to kind of add on to some of what Uncle Leslie was saying and what some of Sissy was saying. What I think we really need moving forward is our own independent Indigenous Aboriginal bodies, because we have so many people out here doing all of this work, but we're doing it through the government and it gets watered down, so we aren't able to see our progress. And what Uncle was telling me before, we have the most advanced systems that there's ever been in relations to governance and our relations with land. We need to independently bring those government systems back and bring real culture back. And if we live our culture through our government systems, the rest will fall into place. We will be able to bring our people back up. We'll be able to keep this climate change, older situations, like what Uncle said. We know how to fix it. We just need to have our own independent bodies so we can actually put in that work and get it done.
Thank you. That's what we need, young, passionate fellas stepping up, taking over and yarning up strong ways now. Sorry, was there who? Oh, yes.
Thank you. I think the one thing that really frustrates me in the Australian Pavilion is that the work that we are doing on the ground as Aboriginal people in Australia is not being acknowledged. In my country, I've led a seagrass restoration program, and there's been no there's no inclusion of that. You know, I've had to teach myself how to write science research papers so that I can lead the paper for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change about how marine heat waves are affecting my community and my culture, and not just the ocean, but how it's actually affecting our peoples as well. That's hard work, and I'm not the only one doing that work too. And I really want to see the Australian government actually stand behind us and say they're proud of us, because they should be. They should be proud of the work that we do. There's no one else in the world that can do the work that we do as Aboriginal people in Australia. And so, you know, whether we have, you know, titles or, government jobs or even, you know, doctorates or whatever, the work is still being done. And, you know, to stop putting the barriers in the way and actually reach out and let us coordinate together, let us rally together, and let us be a unity as one, because we are able to do that. But the barriers that are put into place are stopping us, and they're coming through government. So, you know, let's work, you know, just be proud of what you got rather than just to make us a decoration on the wall.
Thank you, sis, for that one. Did anyone else want to add?
It's on. Yeah, what I want to say is that they have to, like the young brother boy was saying, bring us together, because we've been separated, and we've got non-government agencies are number one with government agencies that will continue to talk for us and take that up. That's got to stop, and we are got to be the people that are talk from here on, not them. And we've got to make sure that the government supports us and not stop supporting them. They're not the ones that are our mission managers now. We are. We know what we want in our country. We know what to do, and we know who to speak to. Our government runs to rugby league football players and football players. Enough of that. We're sick of that. We're here. Stop it. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Auntie.
Yeah, just to reiterate what everyone's talking about, I think we need a cohesion from the ground level all the way up to our policymakers and from mob, not from the government. We need to be resourced so that the people on the ground that are doing the work are in cohesion with the ones that are making the policies. So I'm a cultural fire practitioner. We talk about we have the solutions. I'm sick of going to meetings and being told, as an Indigenous person, as an Aboriginal person, I've got the solutions, but we aren't resourced to do the work on the ground. You know, we're going around everywhere and we can't get the work done on the ground. We can't be resourced to be in country. Country has the answers to all what's going on. Our old stories have the answers, but we're not being allowed to be out there and provide those answers, so we're changing what's going on. So that's what I want to see.
Thank you. So in terms, one last question before we hand over to probably Amber to wrap up and bring it home. In terms of what do you want the rest of the world to know? If we end up with that bid, what do you want the rest of the world to see as us as First Nations Australian people? What would you want them to know us as? You know, what someone coming over from Canada or Mexico and they come visit us, if we end up with it, what do we want them to know about us as a people, who we are? Like, what are the strong things that we want, the message that we're sending out in terms of as people, not necessarily what we're doing, but as people, that they know that we're resilient and strong and passionate.
Yeah, everyone, thank you, Uncle. I'm going to get away from the wind so you can hear me. I'm a Yorta Yorta Djadjaran woman, born in Lutruwita with cultural responsibilities to the Palawa. I do want to just add the outcomes that we're seeking leading into COP. I would love for us to, in that organisation, ensure that we're having a mentoring program for our young people so that our elders are actually really working and taking this moment in time, this very special moment in time, to look at the activism that we have had and the passions and imbue that with the cultural knowledge and the governance structure so that our young people, who are the ones that are going to inherit this catastrophe, we just do everything and put all our dynamic knowledge into them right now. Because I think most of us here have got the experience where we're talking and educating white people. We're spending so much time trying to get them to come to the table. That means we're not having the time with our young people. So let's really focus this next 12 months. Stop educating white people. Let's just focus on the mentoring and the galvanizing of our young people. And for me, what I would love for the whole world to know that our first law is the protection of water. And that as our women rise up, being very solidly supported by our men, that we actually come into the right relationship of understanding as a globe, we have to take back our responsibility and relationship to water.
Okay, we've got this young lady here who hasn't had a yarn yet. Yeah, you go on. You're right. Don't be ashamed. Everyone can have a turn.
I guess.
Yeah, this one here you can have.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia. I think I just wanted to tap onto what you were saying around like educating ourselves, and I think all of us here, everyone who's ever, like every person who's mob who's ever been to a COP before needs to take all of that back to their communities, because these are really, really hard spaces to be in. They're really, really high level spaces to be in. This is my first COP and I'm getting lost. And I think, you know, the reason I'm here, I work for Seed Mob, the reason I'm here is to share back with all of our young volunteers what COP is like and how they can contribute to spaces like this. So I think, yeah, just making sure that we all take everything we're learning back and making sure that we can get into these spaces, because these spaces are really privileged spaces to be in. Like, you know, how many of us are here? There's not many of us here. I mean, there's a lot, but, you know, and Biren has done such a great job of you know, being able to prepare us and bring us in here. But how, when/if COP comes to Adelaide, like, how do we get as many people inside as possible that are the right people to be inside, and how do we make outside massive? And I think the mob here have shown us exactly what, like, you know, the Indigenous Pavilion's amazing. All of the I went out to the People's Summit this morning and take that back home.
Brilliant, thank you. Before Sister Mahala has a yarn, just a question, the last question before we finish off is, what's the international focus? Like, what's the international initiative that we want out of COP31 on a global scale? So you got, as long as Sister Mahala talks, to think about it, and that's the final question before we have to wrap up, and our young sissy are going to bring it home at the end.
Okay, I'll finish with the song, jokes. It's just whenever I get a mic in my hand, I feel like it's karaoke time, but I won't, unless you want me to. I think we've been having a lot of conversations the past couple of days. This is my second COP, and this is what we do best as mob. We take care of country, right? We're sustainable people. How do we create the first COP in a long time that is actually truly sustainable? How do we make it so we're not actually damaging the earth more by holding it on country? And so I'd really love for us to contribute to that, because we hold the answers to that. We've you know, we're taking care of country. We do all of that anyway. So how can we, you know, if we've got it, how can we actually hold it and make things better for the first time? And I think that's something that's a challenge, but something that we have the answer for.
What a beautiful response there, answer, Mahala. You know, as First Nations people, our impact and imprint and footprint on the country, we're always thinking about how heavy we step, and what better way to, you know, direct to COP31 if we end up to think about what is our footprint in holding that COP, and how can we lead it as First Nations people of Australia to do it with the way that we culturally interact with our country, is being conscious of how heavy we step on country. So thank you, that's a beautiful yarn there. So in terms of international initiative, in terms of COP31, our last question, we have to wrap up, unfortunately. What is the strong international initiatives that we need to try and aim for out of COP31? Jean-Valia?
I'm going to move out of the fan as well there. I think that heading into COP31, you know, we're going to be on the international stage. There's going to be thousands upon thousands of people, international media there. The eye of the world is going to be on Australia, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't really seize that opportunity, you know, to show people, like, one of the main messages I guess I would like us to convey is that it's something we know, is that we're here. We're an unceded sovereign people who have never formally ceded or surrendered our lands or our sovereign titles as people. And we may have been suppressed, but we've never been subdued. And I think Australia, you know, we know that that's a colonial racist petro-state, but the world necessarily doesn't know that. Australia has this great sort of marketing gimmick where they're seen as sustainable and all friendly and, you know, the land of the free and the whatever the hell they're talking about in that song. But I think we need to be able to hold Australia to account on that global stage and let them know that we are here living under a repressive government regime that doesn't recognise our rights as Indigenous people, that we may have been signatories to the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People since, what, 2009? But we've never implemented any of that into law. And I think Australia, you know, they know that we know the problems and they're not keen to do anything about it. But international shame, international pressure, the loss of this image that they curate as this progressive, sustainable place, if we threaten that on the global stage, maybe it will finally force their hand into doing something.
Thank you, brother. I just want to open up to some people that haven't had a yarn, like Sister Josie. I know she's ready to lead an end to say something. This is an opportunity. If you haven't had a chance to talk, please seize this moment, because we're going to make sure that all voices are heard here before we have to close this session up.
Thanks, Sam. Waiba Wandiwa, everybody. Josie from the Pilbara in WA. I think coming into the global, space, the COP, exactly what you said, our voices need to be heard. Our songlines and our connection needs to be first and foremost, because that is our connection to country. That is why we protect and are obligated to look after country. And this is the whole thing about climate change, right? It's what a COP is. It's about climate change. And our waters, our land, our people are being attacked, especially in Australia, and we all know it. So, to bring this, the culture and, that narrative to the international space, we all, it actually needs to go out to the wider world and through these forums, through all of these forums. And it is a hard space to be in. It's very hard. And so we've got to make it easier for us in our own country to do the things that we do best.
Thank you, sis. Now, there's only two mob that I'm going to pick on who haven't spoken in the circle. And as I said earlier, with all respect to all the mob, I want you all to have a say. So if I do bypass you, it's because you've had a yarn. But I know Kylie and Jade in the corner haven't had a yarn. You don't want to say anything, sis? Kylie, you want to say something? And then I'm going to have to hand it over to Amber to close up. I think everyone's had a yarn here. And that's that good shared space to talk. So Kylie, if you want to bring it home, and then I'll pass the microphone to Amber.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name's Kylie Clubb. I'm from up in far north Queensland, up in Nudgeen country and Wanjabara country, Yidinji. I think that this is my first COP here, and to see this is just absolutely unreal, to be part of something like this, to have this opportunity. But for us in Australia to hold something like this, that would be unreal. And I think it gives us a perfect opportunity for us to position ourselves, if we were able to come together and collaborate and unite on the forefront when we start to hit the ground and we're going to showcase our country. Let's showcase it. And I honestly think that we need to have an area where we're able to voice our opinion and have those conversations, and they're going to be hard conversations. But let's open a space for that. Why do they need to be at the front protesting? Let's invite them in, let's have a conversation, and let's tackle it head on. If we're going to make any change in this space, this is where it's at. Is it at the COP, COP 31. So let's do it. I think this is where we have the power to make a change in front of the world, and the world is watching. And if we get that opportunity, let's do it.
Thank you very much, Kylie. And just want to say thank you. It's been an honour to moderate this session and yarn up, and we share our stories. And always short time, unfortunately, but us mob know how to adapt. If that's anything, that's what made us survive for this long, and will continue. So I'm going to hand it over to a deadly young leader here to bring us home. No pressure, sis, but she's more than capable to handle it. And thanks again for letting me moderate the session.
Wait, is it working? Yep. Just quick. Ginagay, Nayam Amberose, Nayam Gumbangi Nyami, Nana de Mimiga, Gumbangi Thangari, Nana de Babaga, Kabi Kabi Ginabara. I'm a saltwater freshwater woman from Lismore. Darandang, for all that you've shared. I can hear the passion, I can hear the logic and the soundness that you're bringing to everything that you've shared in this space, and I want to thank you all for your voices, because we know that they matter, but we need everyone else to know that they matter, because as you've articulated, we are the oldest continuing culture in the world, and we have the solutions, we have practical examples, we have when I hear all of you talk, and when you tell me who you are and who you're from, I can hear that you're talking on behalf of your people and your ancestors and all of those generations that are going to come after us. We need to be able to look each other in the eye and know that we're going to be here for another 65,000 years. So what we do now and here together with all the other mob from all over the world in relationship with our government, which we know is forced, we haven't decided to be in this relationship, and so we have to work together to figure out how we shift the power in that, because we have power, but whether or not that's recognized is unfortunately a whole other situation. So we got to come together, and it feels like we could literally yarn for another hour or 5. And so an outcome that I see for COP31, I would propose a working group so that mob who are in this space, we can come together, we can meet fortnightly, monthly, everyone is welcome to meet and share our ideas, because we have a lot to say, because we've been through a lot and a lot is coming our way. Climate crises are only going to get worse. Everything that we are experiencing now are the effects from the past. We are not yet experiencing the effects of the future. So we have to do this now, and we have to do it right way together, because our young ones in the future, 7, 10 generations ahead, they're the ones who are going to be feeling our actions. So I just want to say, Yira Yilambo, Yira Yilana, always was, always will be Aboriginal lands.
Thanks, everyone.